The human brain is pretty amazing. It makes everything in the body work, and when there's a breakdown in mind-body connection, emerging technologies are starting to bridge the gap. So, what can brain implants do now, and what might they do in the future? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Elon Musk's startup, Neuralink, has successfully implanted a wireless brain chip in a human patient. So what do we actually know about this cutting-edge technology?
In Elon Musk style, the announcement was made on X, formerly Twitter. The first implant for his biotech company Neuralink. It enables control of a computer just by thinking. The brain works by sending messages via neurons. When a neuron fires, it creates an electrical pulse which goes from one neuron to another. Sometimes, because of disease or injury, these impulses are interrupted, like in the case of a spinal trauma. The idea of the implant is it'll pick up those electrical messages in the brain, but instead of relaying them to, say, an arm or a leg, it'll send them to a computer, smartphone, or eventually a robotic limb.
But what we have to do when you're just getting little signals, just like a little spike from these neurons, is the computer has to interpret what that means. So you have to train the computer to say, when I am moving my left foot or thinking about moving my left foot, this is what those signals look like.
Last year, scientists in Switzerland used a similar technology to enable a paralyzed man to walk 12 years after his life-changing cycle accident. An implant in the brain correctly interpreted the signals, which were then transmitted via computer to the spinal cord and stimulated the movement, allowing him to put one foot in front of the other. The US Food and Drug Administration gave Neuralink its approval for human testing in May 2023, making it part of a select group. There are currently only about 40 computer interface trials taking place. Neither Elon Musk nor Neuralink have gone into more detail about the trial. For patients with severe mobility issues or who've lost the ability to speak, this could be a game changer. But this, of course, is just the beginning.
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from the Netherlands in the town of Delft is Stephen Rainey. He is senior researcher and lecturer in philosophy and the ethics of technology at Delft University of Technology. And here with me in the studio, we have Berkay Özbek. He is a postgraduate researcher at the Next Generation Neural Interfaces Lab. That's at Imperial College London. And Mary-Anne Russin is technology and science journalist. I'm going to turn to you first, Mary-Anne. You've been writing about this for a decade. I don't know whether to be excited or scared by this technology.
I guess I'm excited by it because of the fact that I speak with neuroscientists and they tell me very much the things that you can do and the things you can't do. And so they say that we will be able to, and we can already track brain waves and use that to remote control certain functions. There's a debate within the industry over whether we need to actually open up somebody's skull and put it in someone's brain. But we can do that, and if we do it, it'll be done very slowly, it'll be very limited trials, and it'll be to do very specific functions, such as to help track somebody's movements, track their brain waves, potentially to help them with, if they're paraplegic, with learning to walk, and to help the people communicate who cannot speak anymore. So there's sort of very limited and very defined, very closely defined use cases. So it excites me, the idea that you could use your brain and your mind to control a computer. But at the same time, I'm not scared because the reality is it's taking a very long time for that to happen. There's not been a huge, significant step change amount of progress in the last 9 years that I've been covering this.
Berkay, are we at the very early stages of this? I mean, it's going to be a long journey, but it is quite incredible, this technology.
Exactly. I believe that we are still crawling, and actually this is not a technology of today. It's been implemented, and some patients are using it for more than 2 decades, but the good thing is the wireless capabilities and accessibility of these implants are getting better. If we look at today's technology, it's possible to get data. It's possible to get recording from your neurons and send it to an external device wirelessly. And you cannot understand if that patient is actually using a neural implant or not. So it is exciting to see that these kind of things are getting more accessible and less invasive, and it also brings question marks if we increase the wireless capabilities of these devices. This would bring some issues related to security or confidential neural information. So I do have hopes that it can really be used to treat some diseases, some neurological issues, but I have also some concerns regarding these increasing capabilities. But I don't think that this is the problem of today. As you said, we are still crawling, so it's going to be more visible maybe in 20 or 30 years.
Let's bring in Stephen. How excited should we be by these advances, Stephen?
Yeah, I think there's really positive potential here for rehabilitative medicine that's just been mentioned. Treatments for things like epilepsy, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's could be on the cards using this kind of technology. Even psychiatric diseases like depression, if it's resistant to other treatments, then maybe direct intervention on the brain could be a way to deal with it. So there's really good potential there for really major steps forward for people who have these key diseases. The reasons that could be there also for caution as well, because it is a nascent technology that's just emerging. So there are those question marks that were just talked about, including maybe most significantly when we're talking about medicine, access to the devices, because they're still in development, and it's not clear that they're going to be distributed evenly in the future whenever they do finally emerge, because presumably they'll be quite expensive. So these question marks sort of urge us to be quite cautious, but also to think about those future scenarios when the technology does emerge, to make sure that we steer it now to the right sort of places.
Stephen, how much moral and ethical responsibility is there on the people implementing this?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, a lot of the people that I've talked to and work with take this very seriously, because the hope that you give to someone whenever you talk about this kind of technology, as you described it, it almost seems magical, right? So you give people a lot of hope whenever you have these devices, and it's a real issue to not overhype them, to give people too much hope, and to be realistic, especially whenever we think about startup companies, which maybe drive a lot of development in this area. There's always the possibility that those companies go bust, for instance, and the technology that you have implanted then becomes a question mark hangs over its upkeep. Also questions about how long lasting the technology can be. Over time, electrodes planted in the brain become less responsive over a process called gliosis, where the brain essentially insulates the electrodes and they become less useful. So having these technologies developed really responsibly and really transparently is totally centrally important whenever you think especially about the medical applications.
Marianne, I want to talk about Elon Musk. I mean, it's impossible to have this conversation and not look at him.
Yep.
Is he doing this? I mean, the guy's a multi-billionaire. Is he doing this because he thinks there's rivers more cash to be made from this technology? Or is there any part of him that's doing this, do you think, for the betterment of mankind, to help people with, you know, who've been badly injured in car crashes, have motor neuron disease? What do you think is the driving factor here?
Yes, I think we can't have most conversations can't be had about tech nowadays without talking about Elon Musk. But in this area specifically, Elon Musk does like to invest in a lot of very unusual projects. He actually started out with an idea that he just really very much wanted to make consumer devices whereby humans could control their phone or their computer remotely with a chip implanted in their brain. And so he started out with a very sketchy idea. He basically bought this Neuralink company. He started doing this during the pandemic and said, oh, we're going to be doing this. We're going to be implanting this into the brains of monkeys. We're going to be doing all this fabulous stuff. And he's just basically so he started with this idea. So clearly he had an interest in it, but maybe not, you know, it was not clear that he had any sort of great aims to help mankind. But he's basically essentially been sat on. He's been sort of put in his place, I feel, over the last 4 years by the scientific community, by regulators, most importantly, by the FDA, sort of saying, well, you can't do this. There's been a lot of, no, you can't. You can't do this. You can't do it for this reason. You cannot do this just because you want to. Consumer device, haha, good luck with that. Wait a while. You're going to have to wait 50 years for that. But what we can do, So then he's basically had to change the management. It was not clear what Neuralink were doing. All the old faces from that 2020 webcast, they're all gone. Hired in proper scientists. And so I basically set out to look at this last year, and I actually wrote an article for the Evening Standard basically looking at what is he doing and what do the actual neuroscientists think. And they sort of said to me, it was sketchy before, but now it's all right. The scientists have got, they're publishing actual medical journals. They've created a robot that can safely implant the chip. It's looking a lot more consistent with the rest of our research and the rest of our work. And frankly, we're happy because no one talks about brain-machine interfaces, and we've been doing this for decades. And now he's put a bit of Hollywood sparkle and got people interested in it. So that's a good thing. But we will believe the results when we see them. There's not as many results for you to even look at. But at the moment, because he's doing it properly, we're fine with that. And we look forward to seeing what research they come up with. So is he doing it for a greater desire to help mankind? I never know with Elon Musk.
It's a good point, though, Berkay, isn't it? A guy like Musk getting involved, he brings the headlines, we're talking about it. What do you think is his driving motivation?
From my perspective, I find it very advantageous because as an electrical engineer, you can design the best microchip that can record neural signals, but you might be lack of knowledge from biology perspective or surgical perspective. So even if you design the best electronics, there should be another team that will design a robot for you to implement this kind of devices. Even if you have this, you should make your device biocompatible. There are many subgroups to achieve the best implement and safe one. So in order to do that, obviously you should have huge budgets. So Elon Musk is doing it. Probably he's really trying to achieve a human model that he was inspired from a sci-fi film or something. So in order to do that, as I said, we are still crawling. What we do is we put an implant, as Neuralink did. We lift off the skin and we remove part of the skull and we put our device. And this device has some electrodes that goes into your neurons. In order to do that, the robot or neurosurgeon should have capability not to create any bleeding because there are vasculature there. So this is another part. Even if you do that, this device is focusing on certain part of the brain, which is, let's say, in Elon Musk's case, which is the motor cortex that governs your emotions. So this is just for recovering some diseases how can I say? For example, in order to understand something from other parts of your brain, you need to drill another hole, let's say, and put this device there. But if you do it for all parts of your brain or scalp is gonna be like a cheese, right? This is not doable.
Yeah.
So there should be something else apart from current devices. That's why I am always saying we are still crawling. We should not be removing any parts of the skull. This is not doable. Instead, we should have devices on the cortex without any damage to our biological tissues. And another good thing is, since it is implemented to a patient, we will be able to now see that what's going to be the long-term effects. Because currently we are making some assumptions so that when we implement our devices, it's going to be always there. In fact, there are some micro moments in the brain. If you implement your electrode, in long term, this position of these electrodes might shift. So this might affect the signal quality that can make your device totally useless. So by this technology, by the device Elon Musk designed, let's say, you'll be able to see this kind of effects and modify our research based on this.
Berkay, thank you. Stephen, it's an interesting point, isn't it, about technology that, buy a new mobile phone this year, within 6 months it's obsolete. So people getting these chips implanted in their brains, are they going to have more operations and get them replaced as the technology improves?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there's already been cases of that's happened. People who've had implants that from companies who've gone bust, as I mentioned before. And there's also questions about As you know from mobile phones as well, they have to be upgraded every now and then, software updates, firmware updates. These questions all hang over that kind of technology as well. What would be the case if your brain chip needs a security update, for instance, and the company no longer exists? Would you then be open to some kind of hacking where someone could take control of your device and cause you harm? And part of the reasoning behind some responses to that kind of scenario leads to people to think that maybe we need new rights or new laws specifically for neurotechnology in this form, precisely because if a private company can provide you with this kind of implant, then it seems like it raises serious issues about what ongoing care in a way that any other device doesn't particularly. So there's a lot of debate at the minute about whether new human rights are needed, so-called neuro-rights, being led mainly by Latin American countries so far.
Stephen, Musk is on record as saying that this technology could protect humanity from AI. Now, he has said, this is Elon Musk directly, a quote from him, with a high bandwidth brain-machine interface, we can actually go along for the ride. I mean, what does that even mean?
Yeah, there he is with that AI again. This is definitely something that interests him. He wants to interface with technology in this sort of seamless, like cognitive way, and have devices actually affect the way your understanding works. And there is some evidence that you can enhance different kinds of dispositions in people using neurotechnology by stimulating different parts of the brain and or inhibiting different kinds of brain activity. I think what Musk means there is that we can just do away with the separation between humans and technology and become techno-humans in some really substantial sense. That you can control your personality, the way you think, by tuning it a little bit. Like, think of your neural device as a kind of control panel. You could just alter the way you think about things, your dispositions, your hopes, your fears. So you can just become a self-made person in a really substantial sense. So yeah, he has this idea of merging, which I think is pretty utopian, and it might be an interesting endpoint for people to aim for, to motivate them towards different goals. But I think it's very unrealistic at this point, and it does raise tons of ethical questions. For instance, one being, if you are the unenhanced person and you decide to enhance yourself with your brain chip, now you're the enhanced person. Well, what kind of personality have you got now? Have you got a disjunct? Have you got a gap between the person you were and the person you are now? And how do we think about things like responsibility for making those decisions?
Marianne, I read an article that said, long term, you could, if you have one of these chips in your brain, and I'm not being flippant here, order a pizza just by thinking about it. I mean, it's a very invasive, risky surgery, isn't it, to have brain surgery, all because humans can order fast food.
Exactly. And when I've been investigating this and discussing this with neuroscientists, they keep pointing out to me, but we can already sense brain waves for different things, but just by using wearable devices. So there's a big debate going on within that brain machine industry, neuro research is, do we really need to be opening up your skull? What do you actually want to do? Why can't we just have a device that's, with sort of like electrodes, basically just sits on your head, but basically that sort of says, okay, you want to do something. But how useful would that be? How much R&D is required? What would you need to make that? So at the moment, that such devices do exist, but they're used to sort of try and help, paraplegics, patients to communicate with their family if they can't speak, for example. And it reads intention, it reads emotions. They can't quite do words yet, which is very exciting, but they can do keywords. Like the patient can actually convey to their family members in the hospital room with them, at the bedside, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm grateful, need water, sit up, put me up. They can actually do that. So I think that's pretty incredible already, but there's an actual use case for that. We don't need to use our brains to think of getting a pizza.
Would you sign up for it?
I would say that if you need to be opening up my skull, I wouldn't, because being somebody who's a tech and science journalist, I understand the medical implications that you should never go outwardly to encourage having useless surgeries. So, no.
Berkay, I notice researching this topic, there's not a huge amount of information out there about Neuralink, and obviously there are commercial and corporate reasons for that. Should we be suspicious? All the information we're getting is coming from Musk's people that there's one patient successfully implanted. That's as much as we know.
Yes, you are right. There are not many sources coming from Neuralink part in terms of, I don't know, papers or anything related to academia, but I'm not that pessimistic. Instead, what they do is somehow related to what academics are doing. And what I mean is you can basically getting some recordings from neurons and you are processing it. After the processing, you are sending this data to an external device. And at this device, you are trying to interpret the neural signals to understand what your patient is trying to or intending to do. So I would not be suspicious about that. Instead, there would be useful, I mean, it would be better if they share more results based on their experiments because when we are doing this in academia, we don't really have chance to try this kind of things in real patients or something. What we do is maximum is try to do it in vivo or in vitro tests, which does not really mimic the real case. So I would not be that pessimistic about this.
Stephen, what will the future look like? You know, if you could just look into a crystal ball and predict for us a few years down the line, if there are people watching who have spinal cord injuries, are in the early stages of motor neuron disease, is this kind of technology going to offer them hope that they previously would never have been able to dream of?
I think it could, yeah. There's a whole ecosystem of things that have to happen in conjunction with the technology itself. So materials have to be developed that can be much more sensitive and smaller and less bioreactive, for example. But already there are interesting cases. Some have just been mentioned already about communication, for instance. People with locked-in syndrome now can have a brain recording device fitted and they can gain a semblance of communication, not quite full speed yet. But all these kinds of different devices and applications give more understanding about how the brain works, and that just each new discovery in a way raises more questions, but it allows researchers to follow a path toward these kinds of medically very useful technologies. So I think probably it's longer than someone like Elon Musk would say. He's always talking about 4 or 5 years, but I think in the medium term, there could be some really nice medical breakthroughs using exactly this kind of technology, just to bypass perhaps a paralyzed body or a body that's otherwise damaged, and to take signals directly from the brain and allow communication, movement, those kinds of things. So I think the future could be really quite positive in that sense.
And do you think,
and again, transparency is key.
Stephen, if he makes a lot of money out of this or makes a success of it, do you think other big tech firms will start exploring these kind of avenues as well?
100%, yeah. I think as well that, again, to talk about data, the data taken from all these sort of experiments will, I think, allow the development of kind of different technologies in tandem, particularly artificial intelligence, because it is a kind of a holy grail, because the human brain operates in very low powered and operates in a very fast way that other devices can't really mimic. So if you can get enough data on how the brain works, and then try to emulate that in another medium, like in a computer, for instance, then you might have a kind of a skeleton key to artificial intelligence. So I think a ton of industries would be interested in that. You could imagine Meta, I think, are already working on a BCI, and I think Apple have a patent or something for earpods that will read brain signals. So yeah, this is totally a growth area. It won't be the medical area, I think, where they make the profits. It'll be the sort of stuff they learn and then apply in other fields, and that'll be what drives them through this brain data collection approach.
Marianne, final question to you. There are only 42 humans alive who have had brain-computer implants. I mean, we're at the infancy of this kind of technology,
Yes.
aren't we?
Yeah, well, we are. I think what's particularly interesting about the Neuralink thing, even though it's being embedded in one person, is that the first that Elon Musk can claim is it's got far more electrodes, it's like 1,024, and the fact that it's also wirelessly enabled. And so the future is most definitely about being able to do it wirelessly and not having to have a person physically connected to any kind of machines. But I think it's also very, very important that we continue to discuss this question about what happens to that data, what are you using it for? So if you remember the very important announcement last year where the Dutch paraplegic was able to walk, and that was a chip that was embedded into his brain and the other one was embedded into his spine. And the point of the wireless there, what was that for? For the two chips to communicate to help him to walk. And so that is good, but the point is that you shouldn't be just willy-nilly embedding an implant for fun, because of the access. How do you update it? Can you just take it out and put another one in? But also the issue is about what do we do with that data and are we encrypting it? And I do believe the likes of Imperial and UCL are now researching into that, of how can you encrypt it? How would you do cybersecurity on the chip? So I would say it's definitely a watch this space. We can probably still film a program just like this in 6 months or a year's time.
That's a very good point to end the discussion on. I'm sure we will. Marianne, Berkay and Stephen, thank you all so much. Fascinating insight. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.